Hey, you are joining the Cover One Fantasy Show, and I am one of your three amigos, joined by Anthony Prohaska and Rich Haynes. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Anthony, go for it, brother.
I'm still super stoked from CM Punk. Like I'm riding a huge high. And then the Bills had a great game on Saturday. Granted, it's just preseason, but I know Rich, you are just as excited and jubilant as I am. I'm still riding that high
I
from.
like how you decided to wait literally 2 seconds to decide to derail the show and go right into CM Punk talk,
That's
which is
all I'm thinking
fantastic.
about.
So the
So
people
much
that have
wrong
jumped
with you
on are
people.
like, "Is this a rest?" I'm so confused. But yeah, now I'm doing good, Gregory and Anthony. Honestly, I'm a little beat up. I'm a little tired. I had a long weekend, a fun weekend. So Greg and myself got to go to an Indians Angels game down at Progressive
Yeah.
Field here in Cleveland and see Otani play, and the Tribe won 9-1. And it was a fun time. I got to go down field box level and all kinds of cool stuff. So that was great. And then last night, I just keep celebrating my birthday for like 3 weeks now. So
The marathon celebration.
yeah, 4 of my buddies and me all have birthdays in the same area. And we've been doing a tradition where we go to a really nice restaurant every year and then go out and pretend we're 22 and go to 22-year-old bars and be the old guys. It's pretty funny. So we did that last night. And then my daughter had swimming and all sorts of stuff going on today. So, it was 96 and humid here in Cleveland. And it was just, so I'm like, I'm a little tired, but I'm ready to talk some fantasy football and like to see everybody jumping on and ending their weekend with us.
Yeah, and tonight our show is brought to you by our sponsors over at Underdog Fantasy. Make sure you're checking out the Underdog Fantasy app. You can download it and use promo code Cover1. Get yourself $25 free. It's a great way to get yourself ready for your home leagues, for your big leagues. You can go in, do a bunch of drafts, get yourself ready and warmed up. I've done an obscene amount of them. I'm on 40. I've done 40 of them now. And
You have a problem.
it's great. So I also got invited to do a charity draft tonight with Matt Miller and the guys over at Draft Scout. That do those and a handful of other people around Twitter. So I did that tonight, and it was crazy to jump in and see the ESPN default rankings and be like, oh, these are crazy. Why is this guy there? Why is that guy going there? But I've done so many of the underdog kind of prep drafts that as I saw them, I got Trey Sermon in like the 11th round because they had him ranked 121. So for like 3 rounds, I was sitting there going, wait, can I wait one more round?
Yep.
Do I think anybody's noticed him yet?
Does anyone else know that?
And I just kept waiting. I'm like, all right, I can't wait anymore. And the same thing, like I obviously like Tyler Higbee, and I got him crazy late, and just other guys like that. That all of a sudden I was like, well, all right, I think I can wait a little bit longer. Rich, you'd be very proud of me. I have Calvin Ridley and CD Lamb, so I did go wide receiver heavies. It was fun, man. It was a lot of fun, and I absolutely felt the benefit of doing the work on Underdog and knowing where guys were and who I liked when, and what it's like if I don't take one of the top 6 quarterbacks, what it's like if I wait on running back, what it's like if I get one of the top 3 tight ends, or if I don't, how long I want to wait for. And now it's very much just right there in position to go. So Charles is spot on here tonight. We are going to go through our favorite sleepers, guys that we like, guys that we think are falling under the radar. But first, the reason that we've been going on Sunday nights the last couple of weeks is so that we can talk a little bit about the games that have been happening on preseason. So, it's, you always have to take what you see with a grain of salt, but there are some takeaways that I think you can take from what you're seeing in these games, and some actionable items with guys that should be rising or falling. So I'll open it up, start with you, Rich. What are some of the things you noticed maybe in the games this weekend, or the combination of games now, that you're turning into a more actionable takeaway?
Yeah, Greg, it's a great question, and what I think is interesting in this preseason, more so than any other, in my opinion, it is becoming, exceedingly difficult to really try to draw some comparisons or draw conclusions from preseason because of the lack of, starters playing at all. But what you can do is look at situational play calling, what teams are trying to do. Like Stefanski, for example, for the Browns, like he just doesn't care about punting really. He's going for in a 4th down a ton or 4th and goal. And we scored a touchdown today. Very nice pass from Keenum to Kaiir Hodge on a 4th and 8 play. Just because the situationally he didn't care about the field goal. It was 0-0. He wanted to go see what we could do on a 4th and 8 situation. So I think you can look at that in these games. For example, in the Jets game, Zach Wilson actually looked really nice this weekend, which I was a little bit surprised about. I had I think there's probably some tweets out there from the draft, Greg, where we are making fun of Mr. Wilson. So we have to check those receipts at some point. But he had a really nice game. I think he went like 9 of 11. And what was interesting is, the targets to the tight end position. Tyler Kroft had a nice game, which
two
is
touchdowns,
two touchdowns, two receptions, 2 touchdowns. Often banged up guy that has produced when he's on the field, and they need a tight end. I think right now he's at the top of the depth chart. I think Chris Herndon's still there, which I know you've always loved, but I don't think Herndon's going to be the guy. So who knows, right? Like that's the type of stuff you can kind of look at there, from a preseason standpoint, what they're going to do in those situations, what kind of play calling they're going to do. And then obviously you can try to translate that to starters, plug the starters' names in. But Zach Wilson for me stood out. I watched the majority of that game. And then, like I said, Tyler Kroft, since we're talking sleepers, we'll talk about that later, but he's certainly maybe a deep sleeper at tight end to kind of take a peek at.
Yeah, probably only in a tight end premium league, but when you get into those tight end premium leagues where maybe every team has 3, some teams have 4, and you're getting into 40 tight ends are being drafted, it's a not crazy name that maybe there is something there where once you get past Corey Davis and Elijah Moore, we'll see who is still there ready to get receptions in that offense. So, Anthony, what were some of the names that stuck out to you or situations that you noticed through the preseason games?
To Rich's point, I think the idea of like watching the preseason to get a handle on what teams are necessarily going to look like in the upcoming season is tough. Like the Chiefs aren't going to roll out Mahomes and everybody and show you everything that they're going to do for the season. But again, like Rich mentioned, you can try and get some trends and thoughts and see what's going on. And for me, a lot of the preseason this year has been about the younger guys, like a lot of the rookies coming in who have some interesting things, whether it's this year or coming up, So Zach Wilson, I'm keeping an eye on a lot of the QBs. Zach Wilson, who is he starting to throw to? What does the target share look like for the weapons on the Jets? How does Justin Fields look? Trey Lance, Trevor Lawrence, even Mac Jones, the whole cavalcade of rookie QBs. And then some of the other like young weapon guys. Like I know Pittsburgh's line is messy and things are weird there, and we make fun of the short passing game and Ben, but Najee Harris looks really, really, really good. He took like a little dump off pass over the middle and turned it into 46 yards up the sideline. So just seeing because in the preseason, like the younger guys are going to get more work. You're going to see a lot of the rookies, and even when the starters, your regular starters aren't in there, you're going to see those younger guys. So I've been keeping an eye on the younger guys who could have an impact this year, but also what they look like down the road and trying to get some early prognostication on what they're going to turn into.
So I've forced myself to think about Najee Harris quite a bit recently because I don't have much exposure to him. And I've gone through and I'm like, all right, well, why? And one of the pieces that I heard, it was from the guys over at Establish the Run. We had Michael Leone on with us, and Adam Levitan and Evan Silva were talking, and that, I think people have convinced themselves that because it's probably not going to be super pretty, and it's not going to be super efficient, and genuinely, maybe he ends the season at like 3.8 yards a carry, that I think people underestimate in today's NFL how powerful it is to have 350 touches. And that if you're top 3 to 5 in touches, almost nothing else matters. Like it's just so much volume that I've been a little bit more open, and I still have him behind Chubb and Eckler and Mixon and those guys there, but like I don't think he's far below. And I do think that at some point, just the volume difference in someone like Najee Harris, it's, he's talented and good. He's going to get a ton of volume. He doesn't have all 3 pieces of the puzzle with, talented blocking and pieces around him. But I've tried to be a little more open to it because I really had avoided him just because, I thought Pittsburgh was a mess, and it probably still is. But he's just going to get the ball so much that it might not matter.
And you also got to think some of the opportunities with the defense, putting them on short fields and opportunities to already start their drives. Yeah, so, start drives in enemy territory or around the 50, and just opportunities for him to have extended or increased opportunities towards the end zone. And he's somebody who I went down the rabbit hole with early in the film process. Eric Turner and I doing the film room, we looked at Najee Harris, and so I just watched so much film, and I came away just super impressed with him as a receiver, as a true 3-down back, and He's going into an offense that, I mean, they tried to use James Conner as a 3-down back. Like, they like to just have one guy be the guy, whether it was Le'Veon Bell or Conner. And even when Conner would go out, it was like, okay, cool, Jalen Samuels is going to be like the guy who's going to get all these touches. And they would split things up here and there for some games, but Mike Tomlin traditionally has liked a featured back, and they got a young rookie who is strong and talented. And exactly to your point, volume is king. So even if he averages those 3.8 yards per carry, he still might have a very strong year because he's going to get so many touches.
So I'll poke around a little bit some of the topics that are coming. Or Rich, did you have a comment on Harris?
Well, yeah, I just actually wanted to stick with Pittsburgh for a minute, which is
because you love them so much.
Which I've pretty much not talked about them at all through what like 15 hours of content. But
they're your favorite team, so you don't want to stay on.
Yeah, I will. I'll stop that. Ben Roethlisberger. I give him a little bit of credit. Granted, it was the Lions and they're terrible, but he did go 8 for 10, 137 yards, 2 touchdowns. So. Yeah, I think, prematurely completely burying the Steelers is probably not the best decision. I mean, they've obviously proven, to have longevity. They have a great culture. Tomlin's a great coach. So, that offensive line is very suspect, which could derail everything, of course. And Ben obviously is up there in age and, makes questionable decisions with the ball. But he's still Ben Roethlisberger. As much as I want to bury him as a Browns fan and hope that they're, RIP dead for the next 10 years because, it's just over. The run's over. But they're not there yet. I mean, they did win 11 straight games last year. Roethlisberger's probably going to put up, some stats. Najee Harris should benefit from that to an extent, at least in the passing game. Greg, both of you, Greg and Anthony, both of you both kind of commented on that. But get the dump off. So in PPR, he certainly still should be somewhat valuable. I agree, Greg. I probably stay away from Rome. Again, he's a Steeler, so I try to do that anyways, just because I'd rather win leagues with this trophy over here without having Steelers on my team. But it's a terrible actual decision in fantasy football. So, I think Roethlisberger as well as Harris are guys that you probably shouldn't stray away from.
There's a couple guys poking around. In the Washington game, we saw a little bit back and forth, and some of the different pieces there. There's been some talk maybe Antonio Gibson was going to take a huge leap forward and that Scott Turner might use him in a Christian McCaffrey type way. And they still use J.D. McKissick a lot. So I think it's okay to be excited about Gibson. I don't know that he has, McCaffrey's crazy season. He played like 97% of the snaps. It was unheard of at running back. That's just really, really hard to replicate. But I like him. I think it's okay to be excited about him. I think he can be right there in that same range we talked about. If you like him more than a Mixon or a Chubb or someone like that, by all means, you take a shot at him. But maybe tamp that down a little bit. De'Ami Brown was a name I wasn't really, tracking too much. But I guess, someone's going to get the ball besides just Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin in that offense. I've been leaning towards Adam Humphrey late a lot as kind of a slot guy, but maybe De'Ami Brown has a chance there. I think that offense is going to throw the ball a lot.
Yeah, Brown looked good. He also had a big drop from a nice rollout and escape by Fitz. But you guys know I've been super high in the Washington offense and their capability. They schemed some interesting things for Logan Thomas so far in the preseason, and he's looked interesting with Fitz. I like him. I already did like him, so I think it kind of solidified things even more for me. But your point with Gibson is really interesting. I believe the stat I saw was I think Ryan Fitzpatrick and Washington's offense has been on the field for 9 third downs. And J.D. McKissick has been the running back for 7 of those 9, and then it's been correct. 1 for Gibson and 1 for Peyton Barber, I believe, or something like that. So, for a guy like Gibson, who was really more of a receiver than running back in college, and then transitioned to running back, you were thinking, oh, well, the receiving piece is going to be easy, and they're going to use him even more, yada, yada. McKissick is still there. And
I was at the Senior Bowl that year, and I watched him work out with the receivers the whole week. People were genuinely wondering, would he play running back or receiver in the NFL? And now he's somehow turned into only a first and second down back. It's kind of funny.
Weird. So weird.
Speaking of drops, just to stay on that topic as we continue talking about kind of week 2 preseason impressions, Jamar Chase. 3 targets, 3 bad drops, alligator arms over the middle on 1. We were obviously, all of us, I think, were fairly, high on the Cincinnati offense in general, just where they were kind of going ADP wise, whether it was Higgins, whether it was Boyd, whether it was Jamar Chase, Burrow, Mixon, and that's a little concerning to have your number 1 pick alligator arm, one over the middle, and then have two other bad drops, when he needs to get that work in and kind of get, get his feet solidified a little bit underneath them and, gain some confidence with Burrow. So that was interesting to me, something I'm going to keep an eye on here for the last preseason game. So yeah, just curious what your opinions were on Jamar and in Cincinnati, I guess, overall.
Yeah. So I'm still a fan. I actually was listening to one of the Kevin Clark for the Athletic, for the Ringer NFL show. He was in Cincinnati, was going through talking about how, hey, some of the initial talks about, oh man, things are looking rough in Cincinnati were maybe a little overblown. They look fine. They're clipping right along. Joe Burrow is coming along slowly, and he said he thinks he's just publicly slow playing his recovery and not wanting to talk it up too much. But they look fine. But I do think, for me, we talked about that ADP. Maybe Chase is the worst value of that group. I don't know that it means I'm off him or don't want him at all, but if he's going ahead of Higgins and way ahead of Boyd, I'll just wait and take one of the other guys, because I don't know that I think people got excited about that year together with him and Burrow and whatever the heck, 20 touchdowns or whatever crazy it was in college. So I don't think Jamar Chase got bad all of a sudden, but if he's going ahead of those other guys, I'll take Tyler Lockett at that same pick and then wait later and take T. Higgins, or I'll take whoever, Keenan Allen, or whoever it might be in that range that I can just take somebody else who's also very good and maybe I feel more comfortable with, and then wait and take a piece later. So I'm not completely out on Jamar Chase, but if he's going to continue to go at that price, I'll probably just wait.
I think people are also connecting or conflating the Justin Jefferson season last year and being like, well, Jamar Chase is the next guy up to have that crazy huge year for a rookie. And I feel like people don't realize the context. Well, one, Justin Jefferson is very good, but how rare a rookie receiver season is like that. And then also a lot of, not to take anything away from Justin Jefferson, he had a lot of points in garbage time for the Vikings where they were done, and he came into like the fourth quarter with like 3 catches for 40 yards and then finished the game with like 9 catches for 160 yards and 2 touchdowns because he put up a huge like end of the third and into the fourth and all these types of things. And you see Jamar Chase, who everybody thought was hands down better than Justin Jefferson, and exactly your point, Greg, the connection with Joe Burrow and then all the other pieces that everybody liked. They were like the sexy pick. You had even like, I mean, I know people like to make fun of PFF, but or no, maybe it was Bleacher Report. I don't remember, but they posted that graphic of, name a better, not even young, name a better receiving trio than these 3 receivers. And it was a graphic of Chase, Boyd, and
might have been a little premature.
Yeah. Exactly, a little premature. And I like the idea of, Burrow downplaying or, kind of downplaying things publicly, but some of those reports scared me. Like the reports come in that Burrow wanted to like throw passes with like coaches and everybody just like circling him like sharks to get him more acclimated and feeling regular and I was like, that sounds like a Chuck Knobloch Yips type of scenario. Like, and that gave me a lot of cause.
Just to speak to that, kept the way he specifically talked about that it was very real and legitimate. And then he's gotten hit once or twice and now it's over. Like now he's over it and he's okay. So like, I don't think they were fabricated. Like I think people were talking about, he, just involuntarily lifted his front leg when he had guys coming low, from there, and like not even like meaning to. He just like, oh wait, I don't want that to get hit, and now is more comfortable stepping into throws and things like that. So I don't think it's crazy. He had more than just an ACL. He blew out his entire knee, MCL, partial PCL, and meniscus injuries to it. So it was a lot going on. So I'm not out on the Cincinnati offense. I still like the potential there, but yeah, maybe some of those. Between the Burrow, easing back into it, between the Jamar Chase drops, maybe it's okay to temper expectations a little bit of them skyrocketing into how we talked about the Chiefs and the Cowboys and the Bills and like high-flying offenses. Maybe they're not in that same realm of what's there.
There's always someone who gets thrown like that. I think last year it was like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Everybody was like, oh my God, he's the perfect fit in this Chiefs offense. He's going to do so much. And people were like, should we take CEH 1? Should we take him top 5? And people who did was kind of like, oh, not great.
Well, so speaking of some of those high-flying offenses, I think there's some curiosity in Kansas City that it's so top-heavy with how much volume goes to Kelsey and to Tyreek Hill that, people forget that, Sammy Watkins caught some balls last year and is gone, and now there's been some buzz about Mecole Hardman. He had the nice touchdown catch, and that if there's a, if he can carve out a third wide receiver role, Rich, you think can they feed three mouths in that offense? It should obviously seem so, but it's so top heavy with the top two that they haven't really. It's been three or four guys cobbled together as that third mouth. Do you think it could become a solidified third option with Hardman?
Yeah, actually I do, and he's on my list of sleepers to talk about. So hey, let's open the book on McCall. I actually have a pretty decent share of him in my underdog leagues. I've been grabbing him late, especially in the best ball, but I like him late in redraft, non-best ball as well. I just think, for me, I always look at situations like that in good offenses, regardless of, is he going to get 100 targets? Probably not, but that's okay because he's still going to get, I think, enough targets where it's going to matter, whether it's red zone. I mean, that's a high scoring offense in general. So yeah, I'm certainly going to be interested in Mecole Hardman. Also, I believe Pringle was getting a little bit of love, but I think Hardman has the inside track on that third wide receiver spot, second wide receiver spot, third option in the passing game, for sure. So yeah, I like him. I think there's been some memes floating around, Twitter where they kind of put like a Lamborghini up when you draft Mecole Hardman and you end up, not getting the Lamborghini off or whatever. But I don't think that's gonna be the case this year. I'm very comfortable taking him late, as a fourth, fifth wide receiver, and just banking on the Chiefs having a solid offense. And I think he is showing that he could, step forward, and there should be enough volume for him. And because I'm also not a huge CH guy, so we can talk about him in a minute too. We got an ankle sprain this weekend, so talking about week 2 impressions. I don't know how good that running game is really going to be. So they're going to pass it a ton still. So yeah, I'm totally fine with Mecole Hardman as a late round wide receiver. Possible sleeper guy that could really boom up the list there. And Ian says Pringles are always.
Yeah, I saw that. That was mad funny.
Yeah. So Anthony, before I talk about Edwards-Helaire, any thoughts on Hardman?
He's got a boatload of speed and a boatload of talent, and he's a really good fit for that offense. And exactly both your points, I think those targets have to go somewhere somehow. I like him a lot in a best ball format because he's going to have those weeks where 3 for
if he catches the long one, you get credit for it. You didn't have to start
exactly. Boom, there you go. I think that might get a little tricky to predict, but if we see, he's definitely worth the flyer because if you start to see that target share be pretty regular for him in the first several weeks, he's a guy who, he's literally, I feel like everybody in that offense was a perfect fit in how Andy Reid and co constructed everything, but he's just built so well for Patrick Mahomes, and he fits so well as a complementary piece to Hill and Kelsey and what they're able to do. And yeah, I think he could be he's the number 2 receiver in that offense, which given the target share to your point of how top heavy they are, I think he could be a viable wide receiver 3 for a lot of fantasy teams this year.
Well, and what's interesting too there is people forget. He was a second round pick out of Georgia. That was 2019, I think. So he's coming into his 3rd year in that system, and I don't think again, Greg, to your point, it wasn't really. I don't think it was a lack of his ability. It just Watkins was there, and there wasn't a ton of opportunity. So he's a young kid, 23. I think some of the projections I'm looking at only has him at about 60 targets. 60 receptions, but so that's probably an 80, 82, 85 target type season. But again, at that, you're probably going to get 800 yards out of the kid. If those, if things pan out, which again, 5th wide receiver, I'll take that.
And maybe a couple games where you're go ahead.
Some of the jet sweeps, he gets some carries in the game. And, I think they've kind of moved on from Demarcus Robinson. Sammy Watkins' targets were not replaced. They did not really add any major receiving impact. So it's interesting. I think there's an opportunity there for him to cobble together, and to go from, like you said, last year he had 62 targets. And if all of a sudden that's 85, maybe 90 targets, I think he could get to 85 or 90 without it impacting Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill having 145 and 135 again. I think a third guy there last year, just to rattle it off, they had guys with 62, 59, 55, 54, and 2 of those guys are gone. They had the 50s. So instead of having 4 guys between 50 and 62, maybe it's 2 guys that have that amount, and it's mainly just a third receiver and a running back. But we'll see where that goes. But speaking of the running back, one of the bigger newest
One
pieces
second,
was
Greg. I
Edwards
actually want to
Helaire.
stay on that topic just for a second because of Donnie's comment, which,
Yeah.
it is interesting. But if you think about it, it all depends on your format of your league. So if you're in a standard kind of 2 running back, 2 wide receiver league, yeah, maybe your wide receiver 5 isn't that big, isn't that big of a deal. But in a redraft, if you're in a 3 wide receiver with a flex, your 5th wide receiver matters, especially
Or 2
with
flexes.
or 2 flex leagues. It definitely matters then. So I mean, it is an important position for or an important spot on a roster for those deeper rostered leagues. And Greg, you've mentioned this in some of the underdog. I think we were talking about it in the live draft we did last week, where week 7 is killer from a bye week standpoint. So you could have multiple wide receivers on your team that are screwed, and you're screwed in week 7 because they are down, and now you have to start Mecole Hardman, or you're one injury away from that wide receiver certainly mattering. So, I mean, I get it. Like, yeah, if you're depending on Mecole Hardman a ton, sure, you're probably in a little bit of a rough shape fantasy wise. But at the same point in time, I mean, that's kind of where champions kind of get won, with that depth and finding the diamond in the rough that maybe steps up and produces, where you don't think they're going to produce. So
to your point there too, of being also one injury away, like Tyreek Hill, a guy who's had hamstring injuries, Hardman could potentially step up into that role.
Yeah, he's not, I think, a direct handcuff. I don't think that if he goes out, he turns into the 140 targets that Tyreek Hill gets, but he would be a for sure top 2 receiver, a wide receiver 2 in that spot with him out. And I think that one of the things that maybe is underestimated with that comment about the wide receiver 5, what if Mecole Hardman is a breakout? And then all of a sudden what that means is you can afford to trade Allen Robinson for the piece that you needed because you needed a tight end, or you can afford to trade Keenan Allen because you wanted to go get, Chris Carson or something like that, where otherwise you can't because, I can't afford to trade anybody. So, yeah, I'd love to make a deal with you, but I need that guy to start. Well, all of a sudden now you have flexibility because you drafted a guy who was your wide receiver 5, but is playing like a wide receiver 3 and playing like an every week flex. That's why stacking those high upside picks matter, and getting guys later on that can explode and bounce out it can either be directly trade ammo for you to trade them when they boom, or what I normally like to do is try to capitalize on, I hit on the later pick, I'll keep that, but I'll trade the name guy that I can now afford to trade to get another piece that I want, and I'll just leverage the fact that I drafted the guy later on and am getting the benefit from him.
Yeah, so Donnie, thanks for those comments.
That's a great question.
Appreciate all the comments, that we get, because it's fun to, talk about things. So I love your opinions. We may agree, we may disagree on them, but it drives conversation. So Donnie, thanks for both of those comments and allowing us to open up on that a little bit. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Good job, Donnie.
So the other piece for the Chiefs is Rich touched on that Clyde Edwards-Helaire ankle injury. I actually just went for the latest update from Pro Football Doc. Dr. Chow just did an update. Everything they've gotten back is there's no real threat for week 1. He looks like he's good to go. It does look short term, just a regular ankle injury, not a high ankle sprain, anything like that. But it's still a question of what's there. The question for me is, what do you do with that information? Do you want Darrell Williams? Do you want Jerick McKinnon, who actually looked like a third down back role kind of thing? Or does it mean you just kind of want to stay away from a little bit and only focus on the passing end of their offense? I will say the splits are interesting last year. Before Le'Veon Bell, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was like a workhorse style back. He was getting a ton of touches. Once they brought on Le'Veon Bell, it really split, and they worked him into the offense. I was curious. I don't know that, obviously Le'Veon Bell's easy to laugh at now. There was maybe more. There's a lot of teams competing to get him last year, and they thought maybe that he still had some of that previous Steelers, value left. I don't know that I think Darrell Williams or Jerick McKinnon are that, but I don't. Do you think it was the name and the talent, or they showed their hand and what they would prefer to do from a usage standpoint? We'll start with you, Rich.
Yeah, I honestly think it was the name. I think it was a little bit of the name. Bringing Le'Veon Bell in personally, I think that Andy Reid just wanted. They made the acquisition, and I think they wanted to try to make it work. And they, he obviously has a lot of experience, and they thought maybe they could, really help. Also, down the stretch too, it's a long season, so I'm sure they were probably, if they could get some things out of Le'Veon Bell, keep CEH fresh. But I don't think that I don't know that necessarily translates to this year. I do think that for me at least, even before the injury, I kind of thought Darrell Williams was a guy I've targeted kind of late, similar, and I guess we'll get into it a little bit here, which we'll touch on during the sleeper section. But Malcolm Brown, Boston Scott, Kenny Gainwell, Damian, like I feel like he's, I'm really targeting those type of guys late for running backs that I'm not super high on, because whether they just don't perform or injury, I now have a running back that I'm getting really late in a good offense. So CEH,
you can say Tony Pollard, it's fine.
Tony, you know what? I don't know why I never, because I don't like Zeke Elliott. I just don't even think of Tony Pollard, which is weird, especially as a Buckeye fan. Like I loved him as a Buckeye. I don't know. But I think Darrell Williams is going to get some carries, and McKinnon looks like he's going to steal some third down. So for me, to kind of your question though, CEH is just a guy that I just don't value at his ADP spot. So if he falls a little bit and he falls in my lap, especially
which maybe this ankle may do.
Yeah, sure. Like I'll grab him, but I don't really feel comfortable taking him in his ADP spot right now. So yeah, I just kind of tend to stay away, and then I'm higher on grabbing Williams or maybe McKinnon later, and then hoping that I just grab that value play.
How about you, Anthony? Any thoughts there? And I'm going to look it up while we're talking here where he's been going, because previously he was in that kind of second tier after the Antonio Gibsons and Mixons and guys like that. But he was going right there at like the 2-3 turn, mid-20s.
22 is his ADP currently from our friends over at footballguys.com, that consensus. So he's right around 22.
Yeah, and if that shifts at all with this injury, does he get himself down closer to David Montgomery or closer to Miles Sanders? Maybe that makes it more interesting. If he stays up there next to Gibson and Najee Harris, I agree. I think it's hard to take any of those guys, to take Edwards-Helaire over any of those guys right now.
Yeah, I was a little iffy going into the year with him just because of, I mentioned it earlier, but you added a running back in the first round last year when they took CEH, and granted, like people make mistakes, but every analyst and pundit was like, oh my God, this is the perfect fit. Oh my God, what an addition. Like the volume, everything was talking about, and, I mentioned it, like people were considering like, should he be the second running back off the board after like McCaffrey? Like people, that's how much he vaulted into like those ADP rankings. And I liked a little of where he was more realistically this year, but I was still a little hesitant. Now with the injury, it's good news for him that he's trending and tracking for week 1. I'm still scared. I mean, if he were to drop into, I don't know, like a 4th or 5th round spot, that's something I'd more consider, but I don't want him at that current ADP, even in maybe late 3rd. If I'm one of the first 3 picks and he's still there coming back on the snake, maybe I'm looking at him. But I echo Rich's sentiment. I'd rather take something more stable early and then try to hit on potential usage from McKinnon or Williams in the back end aspect. But prior to the injury, I thought his ADP was pretty, realistic, and I wouldn't have minded of taking him late 2nd, early 3rd. But this is just, it's hard with fantasy. Like some people like to go for those home run shots, but I'm a big mitigate the risk and try and get some stability, especially in the early rounds. I want to know that I've got guys who are pretty safe from a floor perspective, and I don't think he's there, especially now with the injury concern and potential futility from last year. Although because he had the volume, but the production necessarily wasn't alongside those lines of that volume. So it just gives me more pause for concern and consternation.
So a couple more quick kind of handcuff questions that have maybe fleshed themselves out here before we dive into the sleepers. Certainly looks like a lot of usage for Gus Edwards with J.K. Dobbins there in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Rashad Penny being the guy behind Chris Carson in Seattle has been interesting. I don't know that I anticipated that being the case. And it looks like Xavier Jones might be getting some run in L.A. with Darrell Henderson. Any of those? Obviously, Edwards is probably the most predictable. They run the ball a ton. He was already a piece of it, but maybe more than we're hoping, because I think all of us are fans of J.K. Dobbins. So any of those worry you, or any of those now on your radar? We'll start with you, Anthony. That guys that you're now plucking in that late handcuff range where you want to shoot for upside. Any of those names between Edwards, Jones, or Penny intrigue you?
Edwards for sure. I think just from the nature of the Baltimore beast, like he's obviously a quality handcuff, but a guy who has vulture opportunity, and also just a realistic, I don't know, like 8 touches a game kind of minimum just from how much they run it. Like, so he's got a shot to do some things, and we know that they like him there and have used him. So Edwards is the number one. But Penny is someone who's always been on my radar. I've had at least one share of Chris Carson every year for about the last 3 years. And every year has been basically like, well, Penny's going to eat into his touches and Penny's going to eat into his touches. And then Penny had showed some flashes a couple years ago, gets that devastating injury. And so he's always been kind of lurking and lingering. He's a guy that the Seahawks do some weird things in the draft, but they took him very, very early. I think they took him like someone look it up because I'm not remembering. But yeah,
he's first round pick.
Yeah, I was gonna say he was late first round, right? So like, and everybody was just like, "What?" But they took him and didn't really factor him in. But he's had the talent when he's played. He's shown really good flashes. He had good college tape, and obviously Seattle loved him enough to take him there when they had limited draft picks and they spent an early pick on a running back like that. So I think they'll want to get him in. And so Penny's always on my radar, especially, Chris Carson is one of my sleepers. And so anything with Penny in that backfield is interesting. And again, the last time Penny was healthy, he really started to come on. And then you also factor him into the perspective of, again, I love Chris Carson, but Chris Carson usually gets one injury a year. He might only miss like 2 to 3 games, or he'll play through the injury and, have some nagging stuff. But Penny's always got an opportunity to get some extra touches just because of the injury, let alone because of his talent level and how much the Seahawks value him.
That's definitely interesting. Before we dive into the positional kind of roundup, any other thoughts from the preseason games, things that stuck out to you? Maybe Trey Lance, completing a pass to more than one person.
Well, Trey, I've been actually kind of turning my head and watching Trey a little bit. He's picked it up a little bit here. 2 touchdowns now to pick, 8 of 14. So, he struggled to start. But, the thing that I really, and it's a theme now, which I like, the Patriots running game we've talked about. And, I think there was on one of our earlier episodes, I said, I don't care about the Patriots and I don't want to, even own any of them this year. But I think it's pretty evident that running attack should be fairly productive. Obviously, you're not sure exactly who's going to be the bell cow there, or there probably won't be a bell cow. You're not going to, it's going to be interesting unless an injury helps shake some things out with Damian Harris. Jamal White, Sonny Michel, Ramondre Stevenson, and
not even JJ Taylor.
Right. So, and Stevenson's had a heck of a preseason, big man. So, I kind of, you kind of get the LeGarrette Blount kind of comparisons there a little bit from a goal line standpoint. So even if Damian Harris gets the run and, Jamal White still is the, kind of the change of pace guy, I can still see Stevenson mattering. And if you get an injury there, so, I think there's a lot to talk about there, or, in the Patriots running game, there's a lot to think about in later rounds with Ramondre Stevenson, in my opinion. And, in the same, and Greg, we talked about this actually at the, I believe at the Indians game on Friday night. Yeah, not only does the Patriots running game look pretty good, but the Eagles look like they might be in some trouble as a team because they just got housed, and it's very again, preseason, I get it, but like there's just some things that are not looking great there in Philly from a scheme perspective. I'm
worried their new coaching staff is over their head, to be honest. I'm worried that some of the talent that we're assuming is going to be translating is going to be, I don't know that they're ready to capitalize on what's there. I just am nervous about a lot of pieces of that, and I haven't had a ton of exposure. There's some that are going late enough that it's still worth it, with Boston Scott, people like that. But any major investment in that Philly offense, I am very nervous about it, and I just don't know what they look like they're going to be in it for the first overall pick.
That Flacco played that game. That was some weird. Hurts got scratched at the last minute with like a weird thing, and people thought it was COVID, but then it was a stomach infection.
Yeah, some non-COVID illness.
Yeah, something. And then it turned out he went to the hospital for a stomach infection, and then Flacco came in. They looked good. They moved the ball for like the first 4 or 5 plays, and then they had a snap go over Flacco's head, and then from then on, it was just off to the races. And their defense didn't show up, and it was a very interesting game they let Cam Newton go like 1,000 for 1,000 and pass all over them, which was very interesting. So the Patriots are so interesting. Like, I feel like their running game and their offensive system supports an RB1 or like a low end RB1 or an RB2, high end RB2. But because there's just going to be so many volume things like, oh, it's Damian Harris. And then next week it's like Ramondre and it's time for Ramondre. And then the next week it'll be like, nope, it's a James White game. You're just like, I can't keep guessing which running back is going to do
well. They even talked about it. Could JJ Taylor be on the active game day roster because he can be their Rex Burkhead playing special teams? And hey, sometimes we're just going to give him some carries because,
why not?
Because why not? Yeah. So
secretly, Bill Belichick not only hates Bills fans and the team, he hates fantasy football.
I could see him doing
that wrong.
He's like, I hate this stupid game. Fantasy's stupid. It's for idiots. I'm going to do this to screw it all up.
So, for that reason, I think there's value to be had in that run game. But you definitely need to wait. It's Damian Harris is going first. If you can get him later, that's fine. If he starts to creep up and go earlier, let somebody else take him and go after a Rhamondre Stevenson, go after a James White, go after some other pieces of it. We'll see where that kind of comes together. But let's dive into our sleeper discussion for the night. And we'll start with the quarterback position. It's right off the top. I certainly have leaned into some of the guys that I've talked about, and we've gone back and forth on a few of the different people that intrigue us here. We've obviously had discussions already on several of the guys that we were kind of bullish on, but it's no surprise. I have a lot of Joe Burrow, I have a lot of Matthew Stafford, I have a lot of Ryan Fitzpatrick. I like the idea of getting one of those top 6 quarterbacks. I just struggle to take them over over one of the other guys that are there at the other positions as they're going. So, Rich, who's one of your favorite sleepers at the quarterback position?
So I think a good way to kick this discussion off in general is just to define sleeper.
I like it.
So for me, a true sleeper is somebody that's probably like roughly around pick 120 or later. Obviously, it's dependent upon how many rounds, but 16 rounds. Obviously, it's more of a standard kind of 18, 20 round draft. So it's going to depend on the size of your draft. But I kind of view as true sleeper somebody kind of around 10-ish or later. Give or take. So I agree with Stafford. I have a ton of Stafford exposure in the best ball leagues. I like him a lot as a quarterback you can wait on. I don't know that I necessarily consider Matthew Stafford a sleeper, at least for my definition. So, the quarterback position, if I'm looking kind of like deeper sleepers, I have 2. I have Drew Lock and I have Justin Fields. So Drew Lock, and again, for quarterback sleepers, it's weird too, because unless you're in 2 QB league,
the format changes everything.
Yeah, like Matt, you're probably, if you're using Justin Fields to, kind of to, I don't know if it was Donnie's point earlier. Yeah, like you're probably screwed, right? But I just think Drew Lock has looked pretty good here in the preseason. I kind of liked his moxie a little bit. Last year, I like the weapons they have in Denver. They're going to be behind in games, I think. So I don't know. Drew Lock, deep sleeper for me, is somebody I'm kind of taking a peek at. And then Justin Fields, I think, is taking that job sooner. I can't believe that Andy Dalton's starting week 1, but
it's his time.
So Justin Fields for me is, I don't know that there's going to be any rookie this year that has the Justin Herbert season. But, for me, Justin Fields is somebody that I'm definitely keeping an eye on and would take later or look, to grab waiver wire, right away, hopefully a week before they actually bench Andy Dalton, just to kind of stash on the end of my bench if it's like a, 18 or 20 round draft and I have that available to me. So
I'll say I agree 100%. No rookie's going to have the Justin Herbert rookie season because I don't think any will. Because what he put up passing wise is not going to happen. They could have the Josh Allen rookie year where it's actually not that pretty of football, but because they're so effective running the ball and then you're still starting quarterback with the passing, you might be able to get that from Fields or Lance.
And that point is, I was floating around in my head and I didn't say it. You just said it for me. Justin Fields is very, I don't know if he's similar to Josh Allen, but he has the game where he's going to get yards on the ground.
Oh, yeah.
He is a passing quarterback. Everyone just assumes he's if you watch him at Ohio State, he wants to throw the ball, but he certainly is willing to move out of that pocket and go and get some yards on the ground. And that Bears offensive line looks rough. They actually said it on the telecast a million times in the preseason game this week. He's even a better fit for that team right now because he's going to be mobile. He's going to help that offensive line out, move the pocket. Randy Dalton's just going to get murdered back there. So, I think you're right. I think he could end up being kind of a sneaky quarterback in the from a fantasy perspective because he's going to get points using his legs a little bit, even though it's probably not his first read, but he has the ability. to do it. And tough.
Yeah.
He's tough. He took that hit again this weekend. Got
we talked before the show. Andre Smith lit him up.
In the playoffs.
Right back in.
Yeah.
Ohio State Clemson. He's a tough kid. So I like Justin Fields.
All right. Anthony, where are you at the quarterback position? And to give a reference, I talked pre-show. I had the opportunity to play in a charity league with Matt Miller and some of the guys over at Draft Scout. It's a pretty informed league. It's all guys who do this professionally and relatively know what's going on. But it's a one quarterback league. So even though it's a normal 12-team league, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Cam Newton, Derek Carr, none of those guys were drafted. Like they're on the waiver wire right now. We finished the draft. I just looked at it, 7 other teams and myself have one quarterback because I don't want to take up a roster spot with a backup because it's a short bench in ESPN, and I didn't want to take up a bench spot. I only have 5 running backs and 6 receivers. Like there's not that many spots for people. So it's all strategy where that comes into play. But I have a feeling that there'll be some movement to try to snag some of those guys sooner than later. Anthony, who do you like a quarterback?
It's so I'm going to start off with my definition of a sleeper. So a little different from Rich. I define a sleeper as anyone relative to their overall position grouping, like where they rank and how late they're going, respective to the rest of the field. So for me, my number 1 QB sleeper, I would qualify Stafford as a sleeper for me based on that because he's going as quarterback 11. Fantasy Pros has him ranked as quarterback 12. I think he's got legitimate top 10 upside. I think he could finish inside the top 7 or 6. This was an offense that in 2018, when they were clicking with Jared Goff, who, no disrespect to Jared Goff, I don't think he has the talent that Matthew Stafford has. Jared Goff was quarterback 7 in that Rams offense in 2018 that also had a large, share and volume to Todd Gurley. They don't have Gurley. I recognize the Cam Akers injury could hamper them a little bit, but I think Henderson's a good enough backup, and the weapons they just have on that team from a receiver standpoint, combined with, I know where everybody makes the jokes, but like the offensive mind of Sean McVay and the arm talent of Matthew Stafford. I think Stafford is one of the most underrated players in the NFL. And it's not just because I love that game when his shoulder popped out and he still gunned it out. And
it is a great highlight.
It's so awesome. But just Detroit has been such a dumpster fire for so long with coaching and leadership and management and injuries and just so many things that have gone wrong. I think Matthew Stafford could be unleashed on the NFL. We've seen some good years from Stafford. Granted, it was 4 years ago, but he was QB7 in 2017 for Detroit. We know the arm talent he has. He's strong mentally. And you've got guys like Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. I like Higbee at tight end. I like Van Jefferson. Like they've got a plethora of guys to throw to. And with a defense like that, who gives you a bit of a safety net, I don't think they have any problems trying to go out and air it out and do all they can to attack. And then if we have to punt from a 3-and-out, that's fine. Our defense will go back out there with Aaron Donald and, go do work. And then we'll get back on offense and go after it again. So Matthew Stafford, I like. And then Ryan Fitzpatrick, I've talked about a bunch. I think he's more of a true sleeper definition to Rich's definition as well. And so I'm not going to go too much into him because I've spoken about him in the Washington offense's potential. But a guy who I believe Rich took in our Dynasty League and who Rich has spoken about, Tua Tagovailoa, I think is very interesting. They have good pieces on that offense, and he looked to be in pretty good rhythm over the weekend, and they started to use Waddle a little bit differently, and he saw some success throwing to Myles Gaskin, and we saw the success with him coming out of the backfield, and I still like Parker. Will Fuller going deep. I like Mike Gesicki. I know there's a lot of people, and I know Bills fans especially, everybody wants to write Tua off and make jokes that he's terrible and he sucks and all these things, but they've got a really good stable of weapons on that Miami team, and I still don't think Tua's as bad as everybody likes to think. I know everybody wants to do, Mitchell Trubisky's the second best QB in the AFC East, ha, ha, ha. But and even just from that, like people, pump that information out there, just that right there, I feel like makes Tua an absolute sleeper, and they have good weapons and they have good pieces. So he's a sleeper for me as well.
I think it's sneaky. I think there's an opportunity there for it. And I know one other one that I can't shake. I can't stop myself from trying to make it work is still Daniel Jones. And
it could work.
I want, he can run the ball, and they've tried to invest around him in an offense, and Saquon's supposed to be back. And it's a sleeper because nobody's taking him. Like you can get him, and you can get him for free. Honestly, he's right there with Drew Lock from what Rich had said. Like they're going so late that this is if you wait forever and take a guy and your first guy is a Tua or Fitzpatrick. Like I think you can have a combination where you can cobble together a quarterback with a Fitzpatrick, with a Tua, with Daniel Jones, with a Drew Lock. That not that you maybe want 3 roster spots at quarterback, but if you cobble that together, you can make something out of it. And that I think there's going to be matchups where you can play him. So I like a lot of the guys you mentioned as well. But I can't make myself stop liking Daniel Jones. So I'm gonna keep, I think, clinging to that for one more year until I am forced to accept it.
I also think one more, Patrick Mahomes. I don't think people are talking about him really. I think he could have a good year. He seems like he has a good grasp of that Kansas City offense. So I think he might do some good things.
Definite sleeper. Sleeper. We'll go next to running back. Obviously, running back is going to be the bell cow of most fantasy leagues, and it's tough because it's very top heavy. More than I remember it in a long time. It drops off so fast, and then it becomes just a game of pick your favorite sleeper and who are the guys that you like later on. And some of them are sleepers based on injury opportunities. Some are sleepers because of the muddiness of the backfield. Some are sleepers because of just not having that chance to be able to get in there to play, but the talent is there. So Anthony, we'll start with you this time. Who are some of the folks you like at the running back position?
So we started talking about positional rankings and tiers early in the offseason here. And since that initial time, this guy I feel like is not as much of a sleeper. My initial sleeper coming to this offseason was Mike Davis on an offense that was going to have to score. And yep, I know you liked him as well. On an offense that was going to have to put up points and score because their defense was not going to be good. Their defense has shown in the preseason so far that they're going to continue to not be good. He showed good 3-down potential in Carolina. Granted, the sample size was small, doesn't really have a lot of competition in Atlanta. He was my number 1 sleeper, but again, I think a lot of people labeled him as their sleeper, and now everybody's awake on him.
Yep.
If that's the proper verbiage to use there. So he's still listed around like RB22, but he's somebody who I think has RB like 14 to 12-ish like upside. I think he could finish as like a pretty decent RB2, and he might have some weeks 40 where he puts up like a solid like RB1 score if he gets some touchdown opportunities in that offense as they move the ball. So he's up there for me. And then I mentioned him a little earlier, and this is the only reason I'm calling him a sleeper, just because I think people forget about him. Chris Carson. ADP right now is RB19. He's behind Josh Jacobs. He's behind DeAndre Swift. Last year in 12 games for Chris Carson, so he finished as RB17 in 2020 in 12 games. He was only 30 points behind Nick Chubb, who finished 9th. And he finished as RB17. In 2019, he was RB11, only 15 points from being RB8. And then in 2018, he finished as RB15 in 14 games. Again, I know he's had injury stuff. I know the penny things. He's on an explosive offense. He gets more targets and reception opportunities than people like to discuss. For me, I just think he's a sleeper because his ADP is around RB20, and I think he's somebody who consistently, if he stays healthy, is a guy who finishes around like a top 10 RB. He gets drafted as like a middling RB2, low-end RB2, and he consistently puts up high-end RB2 to almost low-end RB1 numbers every single year. And I don't think he gets enough credit. So he's up there with me, but Mike Davis was my number 1.
So I'll just as a reference, I haven't drafted Mike Davis in a while now because he's moved up so much. As an example, the one I did tonight, he went next after Carson and Josh Jacobs, ahead of Darrell Henderson, ahead of Myles Gaskin, ahead of the rest of the running back crew. But right there, the first pick of the 5th round. Top 50 overall, which
it's crazy how much of a jump.
Not saying that's wrong. It's just now it's no longer a value. You're now paying full price for him. That's, if you think that that's where he should be from an overall standpoint, by all means. But he was going ahead of Cortland Sutton, ahead of T. Higgins, ahead of Julio Jones.
It's crazy because just in what, like maybe what, 3 weeks ago, he was going like round 8, 9,
Yeah.
10-ish type things. We were seeing him like super late, and yeah, it's crazy when
I had every time I was getting him was because it was late 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th. That
Yep.
area. I got him in the 9th twice.
and now you're getting
now
because
you just can't.
every publication was like Mike Davis sleeper, and everybody's like, oh, okay, I'm going to take him early. He's a sleeper.
So, Rich, I'm assuming you're going to dig a little deeper here into the running back core. Who are some of your favorite sleepers?
Yeah, I'm gonna go down the line here a little bit. And actually, I'll stick in Atlanta just for a second. I'm talking like this is bargain basement, like this is undrafted. This is probably just keep an eye on from a waiver wire perspective. But sticking with Atlanta, a gentleman by the name of Javian Hawkins, undrafted kid out of Louisville, right now is getting some looks kind of as a change of pacey third down back. So from a PPR standpoint, like I like Mike Davis too, from everything we've talked about, but just you're like real deep. Like if you want to look for somebody in a PPR league that maybe carves out a role where he can get you that kind of weird flex play in a bye week or really be a kind of a long shot injury fill in. I'm kind of keeping my eye on him, but more traditional sleepers that are still kind of lower. And I think this quarterback, as we talked about, I don't really even consider sleepers a thing in quarterbacks unless you're talking a 2 QB league. It's just because there's not enough that you have to play. But in the running back position, I have a fairly long list, and I won't touch on all of them. You mentioned Xavier Jones earlier. I actually picked him up in the Dynasty League, the Cover One Dynasty League, right after the Cam Akers injury. I went out there and grabbed him off of waivers in that league. I think he's trending like he's going to have some sort of a timeshare with Darrell Henderson, out there. So who knows? Like if he ends up producing, that could easily flip. I don't, Darrell Henderson certainly doesn't have that position solidified for the Rams, in my opinion. And he's, again, Xavier Jones is an undrafted guy in most leagues, I'm sure at this point, or very low, right? So Xavier Jones is a kid that I like to take a peek at. And then, I've mentioned it quite a bit, but I love those opportunities where I'm just not a big fan of the current starting running back. So whether, again, it's, my main one, and Greg, you've tweeted it at me a couple times recently, Malcolm Brown. I just love me some Malcolm Brown in Miami. You can get him so late. We've talked about it quite a bit. Myles Gaskin for Anthony because I kind of crap on Myles a little bit. He actually had a decent preseason game.
He looked great yesterday.
Yeah, he looked pretty good. But I still think Malcolm Brown's going to be a player there in Miami, especially around the goal line, and you can get him, very late, especially compared to Myles Gaskin. So there's a couple of those situations which I mentioned at the top of the show, whether it's Darrell Williams, Damian Williams, the Philly situation, Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell, rookie. I really liked how he looked against the Patriots in the third and fourth quarters. Again, granted, that's not against starters at that point, so you gotta kind of see how that transitions, and that's not going to be something that probably comes out the gate early on in the season is going to produce. So that's probably more of a waiver wire watch type guy. You don't probably have to spend a draft pick on Kenneth Gainwell unless it's a very deep draft, but kind of keep an eye on it. And, we haven't talked about waivers much yet because obviously we're not in season, but you really got to start your list now so you can grab them a week ahead of when you think they're going to go.
Yes,
because if you wait for that week, you're at the mercy of whether it's the waiver wire pecking order or you're spending your waiver wire bucks. So you want to start to build that list now. One other guy, Jamal Williams. I think Jamal Williams is a mid-round type of a guy, and I'm not I don't know that DeAndre Swift is going to lock that down, and Jamal Williams carved out a really nice role in Green Bay. Over the last few years. So I think Jamal Williams is somebody that, again, you can get production out of later in the draft. And if you have an injury to Swift, you're going to have a starting running back. And granted, the Lions are terrible, but it's still a starting back.
I think he's a sneaky, much closer to that poor man's Kareem Hunt, poor man's Gus Edwards than people realize, that he's still going to be like flex playable when Swift is there. And then if he's out, any starting running back is there. He doesn't get the boost that Edwards or Hunt get if Chubb or Dobbins go out, but it's still a better situation than I think people realize. They have actually invested a fair amount in their offensive line. Detroit's offensive line and running game might be semi-functional. I don't have a lot of faith in their passing game, but or the overall or anyone on their defense. But their offensive line is actually halfway decent, so that gives any running back a chance to be able to be competitive. So I like that call with Williams a lot. I think you guys are in the same range as the guys I was looking at. Similarly, there's rightful trepidation with Saquon. I think Devontae Booker has looked okay. And that he's so late, it's free. It's just a flyer. And it might even be somebody where, hey, you need somebody to plug in early on because they decide to sit Saquon for week 1 and week 2, and you just have an extra piece to put in there in case you need, or you have a weird matchup somewhere else. In full PPR leagues, I do like Gio Bernard, with Tampa Bay. I think that he's, I don't know that it's a direct equation to James White, but it's not far off. I think Gio Bernard is a very talented back. He's good, and if you earn Tom Brady's trust, that matters. Like, that is worthwhile and valuable to be able to have somebody that he wants to play, and it seems like that's the case. And then I'll be just a blatant homer. It's crazy that Devin Singletary is going after Zach Moss, and that he's going as late as what he is.
Well, he dropped that pass last year in the AFC Championship game, so he sucks.
I'm still a little mad at him. Tonight, again, in a kind of an industry draft, I got him in the 11th round. I got him, and it was in the and again, it depends on this draft was very wide receiver heavy, like you would expect most guys like that to be. But he's going in the same round as Naeem Hines, and in the same round as guys like that that I think Tony Pollard and Latavius Murray were all in that range, and he was being drafted like he's a handcuff, but I don't think he is. I think he's going to be the starter. So obviously, depending on where you're drafting, you probably can't get him as late if you live in Buffalo. But if you live outside of Buffalo, I think Singletary is going to be the 60 of the 60-40 split with Singletary and Moss. And last year, it wasn't even close from a passing game standpoint. So I think that there's, just a legitimate opportunity that he's worthwhile to have there. Last year, he had 50 targets to Zach Moss's 18, 38 catches to Moss's 14. I just think that he's still going to have more usage and is going to be worthwhile. And if you can, for me, he's like my RB5 in that league, and it's a nice luxury to have. So, getting him in round 11 was something, I was pretty excited about.
That's good. Singletary's a guy that I had on my list, but we didn't talk about this before the show, but I figured one of you two would mention. So Greg, thanks for coming through on Singletary. Then he's on my sheet here. And yeah, I mean, I liked him last year, and for those that are out there that listen, or maybe just are joining this first week, I'm not a Buffalo guy, I'm a Cleveland guy. And I know. Oh, they're like, what? Everyone just stopped listening. But I really like grabbing Moss and Singletary in leagues. I showed you the Dynasty League again at the Indians game on Friday night, where I have both of them, and they're my RB4 basically. Of those two combined are kind of my RB4 in this Dynasty League. I got Moss in the rookie draft last year, and actually somebody dropped Singletary this year, so I grabbed him in the offseason because I was like, that was weird. So I have both of them, and I think
and in this one, Moss went late 9th and Singletary went the 11th. So I took Mike Gesicki in the round that Moss went instead. But it's similar to my comments before on the San Francisco backfield. If you can get both Raheem Mostert and Trey Sermon, you don't have to worry about it. Just take them both and then let it work itself out and figure out where it goes. But if you can get both Moss and Singletary, early on, you can kind of let it play itself out. You're probably not leaning on having to start a running back in the 9th, 10th, 11th round week 1 anyways. So you can let it net itself out a little bit and then kind of figure out later on.
I love that strategy in FFPC. So for those of you that want to play, the kind of the bigger leagues, the Fantasy Football Players Championship, whether it's the $350 Football Guys League or whether it's the main event, the whole shebang one, I love, because I'm a big wide, as we know, I'm a big wide receiver guy, right? So that allows me finding those backfields with the Trey Sermon and the Mostert or the Singletary and the Moss, where I can grab two of those guys mid rounds. I just love being able to tread. Now, granted, I need to get both, so I need to make sure that I'm playing that right. But that just allows me, in my opinion, to grab that extra wide receiver or two, or maybe the tight end and the tight end bonus, from 1.5 point PPR higher up, and then I can grab those guys later. And I'm like, cool, as long as I get both, I know at some point this is going to work out for me.
Yeah. So one name that I've heard kicked around a couple times, and it's similar to our comments with Detroit, kind of a weird backfield. Jose, thank you, man. I appreciate it very much. What do you guys think in Houston, and is it Phillip Lindsay?
Well, I talked about this, I think 2 episodes ago, where I don't know if this is going to matter who it is, but
I don't want to own any
Rex
Texan.
Burkhead.
Philip Lindsay, I mean, I'd rather take a shot at him over David Johnson. Mark Ingram actually got the run in this last preseason game. But again, who knows? I actually didn't watch that one, so I'm not sure what,
what order the carries happened or who started per se.
Carries happened. But I think Philip Lindsay right now is trending to be the starter. I don't know that that's gonna. Again, I don't know if that's gonna matter, but again, late.
Ingram got the start and played with Tyrod Taylor.
Okay, so who knows? They're probably trying to figure that out themselves because I think Lindsay got the start the preseason week 1.
Lindsay got touches the first drive, so they both went back and forth. Ingram got more touches, but they were both in the first drive with Tyrod Taylor.
So who knows? That's going to be one. But again, if you're taking those shots late, and that's one of those situations for me where you're hoping for an injury, right? I mean, not that I want to, not that I want anybody to get hurt, but from a fantasy standpoint,
just to clarify itself,
you're hoping something happens where you can then have, but taking that shot late. But overall, the other backfields I've talked about, whether it was Darrell Williams or Malcolm Brown or Kenneth Gainwell, or Philip Lindsay's probably lower. I don't, I'm lower on that list. I'm not super interested in that unless all of a sudden Watson is the quarterback, which is probably not going to happen. So, but hey, again, deep shot,
Oh, super
appreciate you very much.
Thank you, Jose.
That's awesome. So any other running back sleepers, Anthony? Anybody else you haven't touched on yet? Maybe deeper in. I know you touched on some guys that you thought were good values, but anybody deeper in your list that you're finding yourself taking later in drafts?
You mentioned Gio Bernard. I just thought he's always been so talented since his days back at Carolina, and then even with Cincinnati. I think he could carve out a role there in Tampa, like you mentioned. We mentioned J.D. McKissick. He continues to just find, especially in like full PPR or even if it's just half PPR. He seems to have a role there still as that third down back. And again, for, Antonio Gibson had an injury last year. He potentially could see even more touches if something like that happens. But I think the Washington offense will move the ball and have some point opportunities there. So I like McKissick. I also think this is a very interesting one. I know he's coming off of an injury, but he's really loved in Chicago. Tariq Cohen. Somebody who flashed a little bit at times in Nagy's offense. He's built well for it. He is coming back from an injury. There were a couple of drafts where he went earlier than I thought he would go. I think he should be going later. Like right now he's listed around like RB 54. He's in the Gainwell, Brown, Marlon Mack range. But I think Cohen is someone who could be very interesting, especially whether it's Dalton or Fields, like that outlet guy for Andy Dalton loves to throw those little checkdowns and outlets. And Justin Fields, as of now, he's made some throws, but he's doing a lot of like, oh, I don't feel safe, let me scramble, or I don't feel safe, let me check this down. So I think Cohen could potentially be a viable option for some guys late. Again, especially if you're looking later in the draft in your double-digit rounds and you want to add somebody who has some upside, who is getting forgotten about a little bit. Cohen checks that box for me.
My only concern on Cohen is I believe he's still on the pup.
Yes, he is, but I believe he's supposed to – go ahead.
So I think there's some discussion that he's on his way back, but they don't know for sure that it's for week 1. Mm-hmm. So I think there's an intention that he's coming back. So this is I'm going to use this as an example. The league that I played in, I took Tariq Cohen in the last round of the draft. I did it on purpose because we have IR spots in this league.
Nice.
And I liked it, and I had a weird bye week situation because, of course, I drafted 2 starter running backs in bye week 7 again. And I was in a situation where all of a sudden I was like, oh, well, by the time that matters, I'll have Cohen back. I can stash him. And then 1 or 2 of the other guys, because honestly, I talked about how I didn't take a backup quarterback. I would have taken Fields or Lance, but I was like, oh, I was going to take him. I'll move Cohen to my IR because you can't do that once you have a full roster. Mm-hmm. So I had the full roster. I wouldn't have anyone to put in my IR spot. So the way that carried over, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to draft Cohen. I'll move him to the IR spot. Then I'll go pick up Fields as my backup quarterback.
For chess.
So just keep that in mind. It's not that as a strategy or say, hey, go do that. But know your league structure and setup. If you have IR spots as available, that means that taking Michael Thomas isn't as painful, and maybe you can stash him and then have the roster spot back for a little while. Taking someone like Tariq Cohen, and there's other names that just aren't coming to mind in this moment, that it's okay.
Back in the day, that was Jordy Nelson, man. Remember?
Yeah, yes, always. You could stash
They were
him.
phase, man. Giving him a shout out.
Joe and Tom.
It's been 9 episodes. He's probably mad I've never shouted him out until now, but I just did. So Jordy Nelson, that was your move back then.
Yeah, I'm already trying to figure out when he's going to take Deshaun Watson this year. I'm already trying to calculate it.
Real quick for Anthony, just on Cohen, just for a second, because even though he is injured, and Greg, you made some really nice points there on how you can maybe stash him. Before the injury in 18 and 19, just as a reminder, 71 and 79 catches those 2 years out of the backfield.
Ridiculous.
And that is now I don't know that type of volume would happen here unless Dalton stayed the quarterback long term. I agree with your points, Anthony, that that offensive line may force him to check down, but I just think he's the type of guy that's going to want to try to push the ball downfield. That's been his MO. But either way, if he can get healthy, and can get on the field, he's going to be an interesting person in a PPR.
Yeah, I agree completely. Any other deep names, Anthony?
Christian McCaffrey, guy who just has talent.
Anthony, you're sleepers of Mr. Mahomes and McCaffrey.
Right?
I don't know. This is cutting edge stuff here.
I play for keeps here. No, I think we really covered a lot. I think we touched on it a bit. I think the idea of the Philly backfield is super interesting. I was really high on Miles Sanders last year. I still am to a degree from a talent perspective. I like Miles Sanders, but for whatever reason, I get both last year with Peterson and even this year with Sirianni, there doesn't seem to be like a full commitment to Miles Sanders. He's had a couple fumbling issues again, and as Rich has noted multiple times, the Boston Scott aspect, the Kenneth Gainwell aspect, they have talent and PPR relevance in their backup running backs, and that I feel like somebody there is going to carve out a lower end flex type of role. And also Miles Sanders is a guy who's had a couple injuries. Boston Scott has done well in those times. If Sanders goes down, is Boston Scott all of a sudden vaulted a little bit, or does Kenneth Gainwell see more, and do they split it a little bit? And so I love taking flyers late in drafts on either Boston Scott or Gainwell, trying to get one of them late, because I think at some point, especially if your roster's deep enough and you feel confident with who you have, I like taking one of those guys late and hoping that, I don't know, maybe week 8 or 9-ish, they've all of a sudden carved out a role and you're getting somebody who you could put in your flex spot, or, if you've got injury concerns, you got somebody who you could throw in there.
I like it. Let's dip over to the wide receiver group, and I think this is really interesting this year, just because wide receiver is so deep and there's so many different paths you can go. So depending on the tiers and how we go about it, some of my favorites we brought up in previous shows: Darnell Mooney, Emmanuel Sanders, some guys I want. I joked about how I like the wide receiver 3 in all the big offenses. I wanted Tyler Boyd or Michael Gallup, or guys who are almost like handcuffs to top end passing offenses that you could just get the cheapest piece of it, and if something happens, you stumbled into a nicer player. But Rich, who are some of your targets as we get into your forte at wide receiver?
So we mentioned Mecole Hardman, so I won't touch on him anymore. So you hit on a couple: Darnell Mooney, Manny Sands, as you guys called in Buffalo. I got bingo here.
Yes,
and trying to make it a thing.
It is a thing.
All right, it's a thing. I like it. I like that name. But for me, so Brian Edwards out in for the Raiders.
Talk about a guy who was completely off my radar 3 weeks ago. Like, I knew of him out of South Carolina, but that I had never even remotely considered drafting, and all of a sudden, crazy drumbeat on him.
Obviously didn't do much last year, but there's nothing out there outside of Waller from a target perspective. Tyrell Williams kind of ate in that offense a little bit when he was there for the Raiders. So, I think he's a guy that, again, we're talking, for me, again, 10th round or lower. He's certainly a guy that's gonna be there, to draft. And I think he has the upside. He has the size to be a wide receiver 1 type of player. Derek Carr in that offense, they're going to throw it a little bit. They're certainly not a run heavy team. It's going to be a balanced attack. Henry Ruggs, I like the talent there, but I don't feel like Henry Ruggs is a wide receiver 1. He's more of a stretch the field kind of guy. So I think.
Well, and I'm terrified because I like John Brown a lot in that spot. I thought he was going to sneak in there, similar to how John Brown was for Josh Allen in 2019, where all of a sudden he became kind of a sneaky, playable, wide receiver all the time. I thought he was going to sneak in there and do that in Las Vegas, and I'm scared that Brian Edwards is pushing him out of that spot.
Yeah, and I think that, well, I think Brian Edwards is a guy that he just has, I think, just a little bit different skill set than Smoke, I believe, as you guys called Mr. Brown. I'm trying to get all these things for you guys. But yeah, Brian Edwards is one that was on my list. Speaking of Tyrell Williams, I won't go into it a ton because I did talk about it on other shows. I think he's a guy in Detroit that, again, he's a vet. He probably is going to, be able to pick up that offense well and maybe make a connection with Goff. I'm not a huge Lions fan at all. So, that's one of those like deep guys where, hey, I'll grab him if there's nothing else going on. I have this guy in a ton of leagues. And I talked about it with Greg on Friday. I can't pronounce his name, but we'll give it a shot. Olamide Zacchaeus.
I think
that's right. I like Mighty, so we're going to go with Eeny, Meeny, Mighty Mo Zacchaeus with Atlanta. I don't think Russell Gage is for sure the number 2 there. We've talked about that. Team's going to have to pass a ton over and over again in various episodes. So I think he's a guy that could come in and be maybe a number 2 to Calvin Ridley. And of course, Mr. Pitts is going to take the targets as well, but maybe a third option. So a late kind of guy that I want to take a peek at. And to give my Brownies some love.
Oh, I know.
More of
three names.
More of an injury type of situation. But if Donovan Peoples-Jones,
the law firm,
gets an opportunity, that kid is having an amazing camp. He has ball skills. He can make catches. I love about him is his catch radius is bigger than he actually is because he can make catches behind his body so much that I've seen over and over again. Unfortunately, Case Keenum keeps throwing the ball behind him here in the preseason, but he's making nice plays. And, even the, OBJ's talking him up, Landry's talking him up. I really think he's the heir apparent potentially to OBJ once he leaves.
Talk about the contract status with OBJ and Landry, and you have, from a dynasty standpoint, that is an interesting asset.
So, again, I certainly don't want one of my Browns receivers to get hurt, but if that were to happen, I think Donovan Peoples-Jones is somebody you should run out to the waiver wire and grab because, he had that amazing game-winning catch against Cincinnati last year out of nowhere, and he made a couple big plays last year when he was given the opportunity. So talking deep sleepers, DPJ, and then one more for you, KJ Hamler, again, just sticking with the Drew Lock and the Denver situation. I'm not quite bullish on Cortland Sutton. I don't know this year. I mean, Jerry Jeudy, I think, is going to get the run there, but they're getting the ball to Hamler in some interesting spots, kind of running out of that slot. And he had some intriguing games last year. I think he has a little bit of a connection with Drew Lock already. So again, deep type of a sleeper situation. I think KJ Hamler could potentially have some value in that Denver offense.
I dig it. Anthony, who are your favorite sleeper wide receivers?
Oh, this first one hurts a little for me because I hate the Jets. Corey Davis, someone who
he's going weirdly late.
Yeah, just the start. He gets taken top 10 by Tennessee, but a boatload of talent and just somebody who physically is a very impressive athlete. And just never clicked really in Tennessee, never really the type of offense to air it out and take advantage of him. Last year, he had a couple of big games. He finished as wide receiver 31 in 2020 last year. Right now, his current ADP is wide receiver 50. But so far, we mentioned Zach Wilson earlier. Corey Davis has been a guy that Wilson has looked to when he had 4 catches for 70 yards. There you go, no name. He grabbed Zach Wilson in the last round of his draft. Corey Davis
for how he's looked in preseason isn't crazy.
No, it's not. Like Wilson, I think looks.
He looks functional.
I was going to say he looks better. Fields looked really good at game 1 against the Dolphins, but Wilson has looked functional, and he had a solid game yesterday, and he's looked Corey Davis's way. Davis has found some open areas. He's had good rhythm and timing with Zach Wilson, and so again, are the Jets going to be great? No, but Corey Davis looks to be the wide receiver 1 on a team, and that's good value, especially with where he's going right now with his ADP at wide receiver 50. Also, Greg, I know you've touched on him a bit throughout our episodes this offseason. Marvin Jones. Yeah. I know he has to compete with DJ Chark and Laviska Shenault for some targets, but his ADP right now is wide receiver 53. He finished as wide receiver 17 in 2020, and he finished as wide receiver 27 in 2019. And I just think his ADP is much lower than what he's done. That Urban Meyer offense, who I want to fail, but they air it out a little bit. They're going to move the ball. Trevor Lawrence is, the chosen one of sorts. And I think Marvin Jones is criminally underrated given what he's produced. And also, he's just a talented guy. He's got length. He's got a good catch radius. He's got good hands. He runs better routes than people give him credit for. He can get deep. He's got good size and can be physical. I like him as well.
With the Daredevil offense.
1,000%. That's a great point. You took away my last bullet, so good call. Well done. I don't have to speak about Marvin Jones anymore. And then another one, I've talked about it several times, the Arizona offense. I feel like it's either going to be Christian Kirk or Rondale Moore. I like Kirk more because of the rapport he already has and his speed and some slot work that he can do. His ADP right now is wide receiver 76. I think he ends up finishing as wide receiver 2 for Arizona, just because AJ Green's going to be split out and it allows Kirk's a little more functionality inside and to do some of the things to take advantage of his speed and his agility.
You think he can hold off Rondale Moore?
Yes, but the only thing that's giving me any cause for concern there or pauses at all is they've really kind of featured Moore a little bit in that offense in the preseason so far and given him some work. And I liked him at Purdue. I know, Rich, you mentioned him, that great game against Ohio State several years ago where he just won it in the fourth quarter. I liked him. I like his body type. I like his skill set. I'm just always wary of, not that it can't happen, but really aside from Justin Jefferson, I feel like it's not talked about a ton. We talk about rookie tight ends making an initial impact and that kind of the difficulty it is for that position to make an impact. Why rookie wide receivers, they fare much better than rookie tight ends, but you don't really see a lot of rookie wide receivers who stake their claim right away and have a massive year or put themselves on the map.
The hard part is people talk about Justin Jefferson as though Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs weren't also first round picks last year, and that plenty of people had them as well, or that CeeDee Lamb started out really well but had some rough games, and that it's just really hard to peg which one. That it has been very common for a rookie receiver to break out or 2 rookie receivers to break out, but it's hard when you're picking amongst 7 or 8 of them to figure out which one is going to be the one that breaks
exactly
out.
And when you add that in with Rondale Moore, I just that position grouping, that's what makes me vault Kirk ahead of him. If it ended up being Rondale Moore, I wouldn't be completely surprised, but right now I'm putting my eggs into that Kirk basket. And then opposite, another, I think, a deeper, little later sleeper. This person is a rookie. Terrace Marshall Jr. continues to show out for Carolina. Yep. And for a team I love DJ Moore, but he plays very physical and he's had some injuries and he's had some knocks. Robbie Anderson can be mercurial at times. Maybe Terrace Marshall carves out the wide receiver 3 role and maybe has some games where he's able to step into a number 2 spot due to some injury or some things. Granted, you also have to bank on Sam Darnold being the type of guy who can sustain, fantasy numbers for your wide receivers, but he's also somebody who he continues to show out in the preseason, and especially in a dynasty league, throw a pick at him. But I think he's somebody to keep an eye on late rounds or even potentially off waivers because he just continues to flash.
Very, very I just want to make a quick comment on Rondale Moore. I mean, I liked all the things you're saying about that situation. I just, everything you said about why you kind of lean Kirk, I like all those arguments for why I kind of lean Rondale Moore, and I kind of take it to another level. I don't think that it's by accident that they have designed plays for him so far in the preseason. They're going to do that and get him the ball in space, throughout the season. So I think he's going to have maybe 3 to 5 design type of plays to him, whether it's screens, whether it's under out, whatever, just to get him the ball in space. And I like Christian Kirk, but I don't think they're going to, I don't think they're going to force targets to Kirk. It's going to be because of the things you mentioned, whether it's, Nuke taking coverage or whether it's AJ Green taking coverage and he's just, vertical down the sideline, being able to make some plays. So, I like, obviously that offense is high powered. I personally lean Rondale Moore a little bit more, especially deep sleeper. And again, we're talking about players here that they don't have to be Justin Jefferson, right? I mean, we're just kind of talking about guys that could come in and participate and contribute to your team here.
The debate I have, and see, that's a good point. But the debate I have in my head is, are the 3 to 5 schemed plays for Moore enough to outweigh all the snap. Like I think Kirk sees more snaps than Moore. So do the scheme plays for Moore outweigh the total snaps that Kirk gets? That's what I go.
I think it
back and
depends on
forth
AJ
with.
Green for Kirk. I think if
Yes,
AJ
that's
Green
a good
stays
call.
healthy, then I think that hurts Kirk and Rondale Moore. We're gonna do this throughout the season. We're gonna compete with each other. So this is I'm putting the flag in the ground here. This is the first one. So me versus Anthony, we need to come up with some sort of bet right now. Whoever has
Loser
a
dies.
better fantasy season between Rondale Moore or Christian Kirk, PPR, single point PPR, will have to buy each other some sort of lunch via Venmo, DoorDash a lunch to the other person at the end of the season.
But I also like Rondale Moore, so okay,
Stand
yeah,
the
fair
truth.
enough.
But no, I think that's fun. We need to have some kind of bet board on guys where it's a fun balance of things.
I didn't get a confirmation
tally
from
to be able to go.
Is he running away from
No, because I led with saying I also like Rondale Moore, and I go back and forth. But sure, just for the fun of it, yeah, we will. I'll plant my flag for Christian Kirk that I don't really want to plant, but I'm down for it. Sure.
Sounded like you did, man. Hey, I mean,
I like it.
He wants both flags. He wants Rondale Moore and
All
Christian
the flags.
Kirk.
No, I'm just so because the debate I have, and I mentioned it with when Michael Leone was on, like what we just said. Like I like what Moore brings, and I like the scheme ability. But then I think Kirk should see more snaps, thus more opportunities, thus more potential targets and volume. But is he just on the field and he's just on the field versus Rondale Moore is on the field to get the ball? So what does that because again, snaps are great, but they're meaningless if they don't result in targets and or touches. So is more on the field less, but
he had the second most targets in Arizona last year, but it was still a huge drop from DeAndre Hopkins' enormous target share.
Yeah, he finished as wide
now,
receiver 50 last year.
Yeah, and Larry Fitzgerald, his 72 targets are gone. Do those 72, so last year Christian Kirk at 79, do those 72 targets directly go to Rondale Moore? Does he get that many? Does anyone else step up? And how much does AJ Green soak up amongst that group? Andy Isabella only had 35. Keyshawn Johnson had 23. There really weren't any other wide receivers that ate in that offense. It was DeAndre Hopkins with a ton, Christian Kirk, Larry Fitzgerald. Now you've added AJ Green and Rondale Moore. It's going to be interesting to see. I do think there's a second playable asset in that passing game. I don't know how confident I feel on which it is. A piece of me thinks that it's going to be Rondale Moore, but I also want to say AJ Green just to be able to jump into the bet for no reason, but it's definitely not.
So fair. So we just plant a flag for AJ Green, and we got a triple threat match going on. We got a 3-way dance. I'll take Kirk. Rich has Rondale Moore. You have to take AJ Green.
Oh God!
I love this bet. Yeah, great.
Yeah, no. I will for sure not do that. Some of the other names we've talked about, guys that are floating around there. It was kind of a joke about how he got acquired, but I kind of think Randall Cobb can have a little bit of value later on. That having a second option in Green Bay could have some value there. I do think that there's a chance you can poke around and be able to do that. I'm curious, similar to the Rondale Moore comments, do they scheme some stuff for Amon-Ra St. Brown in Detroit? I do like Tyrell Williams as if I'm going to pick a Detroit guy, but I wonder if there's maybe a little bit there. The same idea, we've seen some flashes for Quez Watkins in Philadelphia. I'm really curious how that offense is going to work, and are we going to see Jalen Reagor kind of step forward with any of the value that was there? Can Devontae Smith stay healthy? Do we want any parts of that offense at all? I'm not sure how that's going to go. But those are some guys that I think are interesting. Any final thoughts on wide receiver before we go to tight end? All right. So for sleeper tight ends, obviously it depends on where you're defining that and how you're going through. But I think later on, I think some of the guys that we've talked about, that Gesicki, Tyler Higbee, guys like that, are at the tail end of the starting range and are guys that I like, but are there, in the next tier below there. I'd bring some attention to Cole Kmet. I think that's interesting with Justin Fields. I'm curious about Gerald Everett going to Seattle with Russell Wilson, and I want it to be Blake Jarwin, but I'm nervous that maybe it's Dalton Schultz. I think that someone out of those two can matter, but they're going late enough where I don't know that it matters which one you get. But those are some of the names there. Obviously, I love Higbee and Gesicki. I have a ton of them, but I think they're pretty common names that are out there. But those are some of the ones. Maybe Adam Troutman is a potential later guy. Rich, who are your favorite tight ends in the sleeper group?
So yeah, this is a position that's interesting too. It's kind of like quarterback, right? Like, since
There are three
only
guys
starting
and
one.
everyone else is a sleeper.
Well, yeah, but even that, like at least again, kind of based on my definition, since you're only starting one tight end, even in a tight end premium, I suppose you could be playing at flex if that's if that's possible. But you're 12 tight ends, right? So I mean, you're not. I don't know. But from somebody outside of that top 12, there's two names that I have on my list that you didn't mention. I had Blake Jarwin and Dalton Schultz combo pack on my list as well, so I agree there. David Njoku, I've talked about him on previous episodes with the Browns. He's going to get touchdowns this year. He wants to. He just fired Drew Rosenhaus. He wants to re-sign with the Browns, which is a complete 180 from where they were at last year from a contract standpoint. Austin Hooper's kind of underperformed a little bit. They run a ton of two tight end sets anyways. So, Austin Hooper's a good blocker. He's going to get loose, kind of down the seam and definitely in those red zone situations. So David Njoku is an undrafted guy for sure in most leagues that you can pick up. And, again, in a best ball league for sure, I would grab him. But even in redraft, I would keep an eye on him because you never know. And Baker loves to throw to those big targets from a red zone perspective. And he has kind of a connection with Njoku. The other guy that I like, and I believe I talked about him in our tight end episode as well, but I'll reiterate it here, Irv Smith from Minnesota, Alabama kid, didn't get the chance last year because Rudolph was still kind of in the mix. Looks like he's going to get the opportunity this year in Minnesota to potentially be a decent part of that passing offense. So, I like Irv Smith's potential, outside of Jefferson and Thielen. There's not a ton there at wide receiver. Obviously, Cook's going to take a ton. But, Kirk Cousins is extremely underrated. He throws for 4,000 yards basically every year. So I think Irv Smith's going to get an opportunity there and somebody that's kind of outside of that top 12 that you can get late in most drafts and maybe have catch some lightning in a bottle there from a tight end perspective.
I like it. Anthony, who do you like? I just looked at it. Kirk Cousins had 4,200 passing yards and 35 touchdowns last year.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the 2020 Viking season. I was like, that's more than I thought.
Also had a lot of, they had garbage time stuff. Like
I actually have Cousins on my sleeper list for quarterback, but I did not mention him because he doesn't really fit into my round. I guess it can. It's right on. He's like right on the cusp of that round 10 or later.
It's crazy that we're even talking about him as a sleeper or unassuming things, considering the contract that he got and how he changed the market for QBs.
It's really interesting. But just from a target standpoint, they're getting rid of Kyle Rudolph. If you now, it's not as simple as give Irv Smith all of Rudolph's targets, but I do think that it could be possible that he takes over a majority of those targets and now jumps into third in that range. And maybe he gets himself up to 70, 80 targets. And then all of a sudden you're talking about 70, 80 targets. Maybe he can get himself a nice chunk of yards there. I like that Irv Smith call. Anthony, who you got?
Yeah, you guys touched on several. I like the Irv Smith call out. Gerald Everett as well. Just to knock all the guys off my list, I'm going to go down to somebody who I mentioned on the show, Anthony Firkser in Tennessee. I liked what he did in some spot duty in Tennessee last year. I like him as a player. He's a good route runner. He's athletic. He's got good hands, and he has Ryan Tannehill's trust. Right now, his ADP has him as tight end 21. So I like that for him. And also somebody to keep an eye on. I don't know the impact he'll have this year, but I guess this is more for dynasty and late things. Pat Freiermuth had 2 touchdowns with Ben, and it's not the touchdowns I'm really looking at. The routes that he ran on those tight ends were very impressive, and he elevated and showed good body control and good hands. I was very impressed with his movement and understanding of coverage and how to shake loose and find the open spot and work with Ben. He impressed me a lot. I know Ebron is more the guy who's going to see more snaps, and maybe, Freiermuth carves out a role for himself down the stretch potentially, but in dynasty, he's someone who I would target. And if you're just talking redraft, I guess late, deep round action. I don't know if I'd necessarily consider him now, but he flashed really well, not just from the touchdowns, but the routes that he ran to get those scores were very impressive. And not to just be a Bills guy, but Dawson Knox, a guy who's found the end zone a decent amount of time with the Bills. And, we've said all the time throughout this offseason, hope is not a plan, but if Dawson Knox, hopefully turns the corner and becomes more consistent. He did have a drop this past game. Shocking.
Like he does.
Like he is one to do, because it was an easy catch. But if he only had to catch it with one hand or with his face mask, he would have come down with it, because that's what he does.
He only makes impressive catches.
1,000%. But I think he's somebody, especially too, like if you're in a non-Buffalo league, I don't think somebody there is being like, well, I got to grab Dawson Knox. Yeah. So if you're getting him late, I think he's worth a shot, because again, that upside is there. I don't know if the target share is going to be there, but he's somebody that Josh likes, and he gets goal line looks and touchdowns. If you can also add some more consistency in between the 20s, he's somebody who's worth a late round ad.
Yeah, it's a chance at a piece of a high end passing offense. So
until we get Zach Ertz, of course.
Yeah, obviously. So, guys, tonight was a lot of fun. We'll go through and have more content for you guys leading up to the draft. Make sure you take a chance to go listen to some of the shows we've had up until now. We did preview shows, having a lot of fun, industry experts on, going through quarterback, wide receiver, running back, tight ends, and defenses, going through draft strategies, going through live drafts. We'll do some more of those leading up to the draft here, but it's getting into showtime. These next couple weekends are really going to be the key to your fantasy season. So Rich, Anthony, I'll go to you guys for any parting thoughts and any last minute ideas or things for the people before we sign off. Rich, anything for you that you have for the good folks?
Yeah, I'm just looking forward to getting this season kicked off, because I'm looking forward to being able to talk trades, talk waiver wire pickups, all those types of fun moves, getting into more competition between the three of us, whether it's putting our best ball teams up against each other for some side bets or, waiver wire pickups or something like that. I'm looking forward to my sandwich from Anthony from Rondell Moore. And one other just real quick injury piece, Carson Wentz. We didn't talk about Carson Wentz, but he looks like he's returning to practice, which is interesting. So, I know everyone was kind of worried about that when he first went down and how that could impact the Colts. So just want to throw that out there as well. If anyone did not see that, it looks like he will be back at practice. That's it, Mr. Gregory.
I like it. Anthony, what do you got?
Same as Rich, excited for the season. And like you mentioned, we're in the teeth of it now. Like, you're going to start to get I feel like a lot of people, your main leagues or your redraft leagues or whatever, are starting to kick into full motion. We're just a couple weeks away from Labor Day and several short weeks away from the start of the regular season. So things are going to start to be, coming out of nowhere when it comes to drafts, and you don't want to be caught being that person that's like, oh yeah, my draft is like tomorrow and I haven't done anything for it. So we've got a lot of stuff and great content for you to guide you, to walk you through these fantasy football waters. I guess I'm planting my flag for Christian Kirk. I don't really know how that happened, but I guess I'm Team Kirk all the way.
Remember how you hate Rondale Moore? It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm waiting for I'm waiting for it to turn like mid-season. Yeah, because Anthony hates Rondale Moore. I'm like, what? I don't know. I like him.
These are how good politicians spin work, man. I'm just doing my job.
That's exactly what it is. Well played. But no, yeah, I mean, it's football time. Training camp started. Preseason is in full swing. We got one more preseason game, and then we're close. So fantasy's revving up, which is the bane of my existence, and real football is starting and about to matter. And I'm excited, and we got a lot of great content for people that we keep churning out.
Absolutely. So thank you guys for listening. Appreciate you guys checking us out. Check out our sponsors over Underdog Fantasy. Download the Underdog Fantasy app. You can use promo code COVER1 to get yourself $25 free if you do a minimum deposit of 10. Check out all these fun drafts. You can get yourself ready and do some real prep where you can find out where guys are going and have yourself lined up ready to dominate your league. Come on over, have some fun. We appreciate everybody checking us out. But on behalf of Rich Haynes, Anthony Prohaska, I am Greg Tompsett. You have been listening to Cover One Fantasy, and we are out.